All right, now joining us on Tennis Channel Inside In, first time appearance on this show. We like to widen the net. You know, anybody that's interested in tennis and has a cool backstory in the sports world, we're happy to have. A veteran sportscaster, well established in the game. He's worked for and currently works for a slew of networks here, MLB Network, NHL Network. He's been at DAZN. He's got his own podcast, Cinephile, where he talks about the current news and notes in the cinema and entertainment world. Adnan Virk, welcome to the show. It's been a long time coming. Pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks so much, Mitch. I appreciate it, man. I'm so happy to be able to talk tennis with somebody who knows it and loves it as much as I do. So I was flattered by the ask. You dropped Steve Weissman in your initial request to me. Love Weissman, so I'm in.
Yeah, it was. I had to do it. I had to bring out the heavy hitters to get you involved. But Steve's
it's a good name drop. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll start with this backstory here. I know you're a tennis fan, and I know the initial stuff that you can research on yourself, you know, growing up in Canada with Pakistani immigrants, but you didn't really play it. I guess you played basketball and soccer. Where did the tennis love, where did that core interest in the game come from?
Yeah, you know, honestly, it stemmed from my mom, Mitch. She was born in Pakistan, but emigrated to England when she was 10. So, you know, growing up in England, all my mom's family is still in England to this day. So, you know, she really passed on that love of Wimbledon to me. And I remember being 7 years old, watching Wimbledon with her, and a young 17-year-old Boris Becker was just wowing everybody, and fell in love with Becker, fell in love with the game, fell in love with Wimbledon specifically. So, yeah, it stemmed from my mom. She didn't really play, but I quickly started playing. And it was one of the great things about tennis, as you know, is you just need a ball and a racket, just hit the ball against a concrete wall, and that's good enough for me. So I would do that, and eventually found a few friends to play with, but never played at any appreciable level. Just literally played for fun, recreation. I still play to this day once a week. It's just fun to get out there and hit a ball rather than run on a treadmill. So yeah, it stemmed from my mom, and specifically Wimbledon. Those 80s matches, Becker specifically, was incredible watching him just flying all over the court. I watched the Alex Gibney documentary, you know, Boom Boom versus the World, Boris Becker on Apple Plus, and it brought back so many memories, man. I mean, he's got a fascinating life, and I feel sorry for him, some of the mistakes he's made, and I'm glad he's back on his feet, because I idolized him as a kid, man. I remember meeting Dirk Nowitzki when I covered the NBA, and I said to him, you know, who's a bigger deal to you as a German athlete, Katarina Witt or Boris Becker? He's like, oh my God, Boris. He's like, forget about it. Like and watching that documentary, you realize just how powerful and popular he was and still is. Like in Germany, there's nothing bigger than Becker, and it was really, really cool to watch him in those 80s matches.
He ushered in a new era, and it's fascinating too. We talk about phenoms, and he gets lost in the shuffle, that what he did at 17, and as a physical freak, how powerful he was in a sport that didn't have anyone really like that ever in the game before.
100%. It's one of the biggest things I miss about tennis today, Mitch, is the serve and volley. Like I don't probably never come back now. Guys just hang on the baseline and just hit incredible ground strokes. But like, I just miss the idea of Becker just boom, boom serve coming in, one volley, diving all over the place. It's just such fun tennis to watch, like him and Stefan Edberg going toe to toe, and obviously great stories about him and McEnroe as well. But I really just miss the serve and volley. You know, Tim Henman doing that. The Henman's Hill back in England was great. So I just love that style of tennis. I just think, you know, it's obviously quick points, it's attacking, but I just think it's fun. It's aesthetically pleasing. It's aggressive. It's risky. You know, quicker points. Yeah. So I miss a lot of that stuff. And yeah, it was just like you said, it was a different era and a different style of tennis. What's shocking to me too is, you know, I always think him was one of the great Wimbledon champions, and he is, because he won it 3 times, but he also lost it 4 times. Like, it's shocking to me. He actually lost more Wimbledon finals than he won, 3 and 4. And yet I think of him as a 3-time champion. It's crazy, but 6 majors overall, pretty impressive.
Without Pete Sampras there taking a few, and not just the finals, but along the way, it was tough. And it's interesting you brought up Wimbledon, because that has changed so much just in your lifetime, how the style is different, serve and volley with Becker, but how the courts play. I talked to ex-pros quite a bit, and they're just like, man, it's not the same. It's such a different game. They don't say it in a way that it's negative, but it's just the sense that the balls literally just bounce way higher, and it is slower than what they were used to.
Yeah, it's a silly observation too, but I always love, like, next week we're going to be watching Wimbledon, and I always love the first couple of days because it's all green, like it's all truly grass, and then like after 3 days it's all brown, because obviously they're running all over that court. Like it just always bothers me aesthetically. Can we just go back to the green? But yeah, it's a different style of game.
It is fascinating too to make the observation that I don't think many non-tennis fans have in the sports world, that just how they are athletic to a point where they might even be, some would say, and I would even argue, well, the most well-rounded athletes in the world. You talk about, you know, just in the French Open, there's reports of guys losing 5-6 pounds playing a 5-hour tennis match. I mean, what they're asked to do, and you have an appreciation that most don't, that it's athleticism, it's conditioning on a whole nother level.
Yeah, like when you often hear about best conditioned athletes, a lot of people say boxers, and I get that, just moving and sticking and moving and dance all the time. Obviously, I love boxing, did it to zone. You hear some people mention hockey players again, being Canadian. You hear a lot of votes for hockey because, again, the strength, the agility, the flexibility. But I'm with you on tennis, man. Like those epic matches, and it doesn't have to be, John Isner and Mahut. Like it can just be, as you said, just a regular 4-set match in a really hot weather at the Australian Open. Like you're baking, and it's such a great mental game. Like that's part of the greatness of tennis, as you know, is it's not just physically grueling, but mentally taxing. You really do have to believe in yourself. And it's the competitive will is amazing.
Those were the three. I mean, you named my top three well-rounded athletes: tennis, boxing, hockey. It's those three. So we're on the same wavelength there. Well, I know your main guy in history. It doesn't have to, you don't have to go too far from your Twitter feed to see that. You were on Federer early and often. You've actually hung on to the GOAT, longer than most, going down with the ship. But I mean, I guess that's the easiest question. What was it about Roger that drew you to him at an early point and then made you say, all right, I'm along. This is my guy. I'm along for the whole ride.
I think what I found, Mitch, was just the way he would obliterate opponents to me was just so incredible. Like it didn't even seem like a fair fight. When he started winning majors in 03 and 04, and just in bushels, just collecting them so easily. And it was really the fluidity of his game. It was not only the fact he was crushing them, but he was crushing them in such a gentlemanly manner. Like, Roger Federer would just rip your heart out, but he seemed to do it like in the most classiest manner possible. And that was what stood out to me about Federer. Was like, wow, he just boat raced this guy, and yet, didn't even really seem to break a sweat and didn't seem overly emotional about it. Later in his career, you'd see more of Roger's emotions. You never forget the losses as well. When he lost to Rafa at the Aussie Open, just started crying. Oh, this is so hard, and started crying. And when Rafa was like, "It's okay, Roger. You're gonna get more of these." Like it was amazing because he seemed like this. I wouldn't say machine-like, but almost a cyborg. The way he was destroying everybody. And then once he let you in and you saw the vulnerability, you said, "Oh my God, this is actually a human being." And he loves and cares and wants to win as much as anybody. Just because he's not screaming and ranting and raving like McEnroe or grunting like Nadal. He wants to win as much as anybody. And I said, that's even more impressive to me. He's as competitive as anyone, but he does it in such a gentlemanly manner. And the number one word I would always use to describe Federer, both on the field and off, is, of course, elegance. And the elegance of his shot making, the precision of his strokes. It just always seems so pinpoint. I said, he's just like a craftsman out there. He's just so accurate in that forehand and the serve. And I remember I would talk to Marty Fish about it. And I said, his serve is really underrated. He goes, absolutely. He goes, nobody mentions Roger's serve, but like when it was rolling, it was like, oh my God, it was a thing of beauty, the way he could move guys around, the spin he would get on it as well. And always unflappable, never really seemed to be out of it, but different. Like I once called Yvonne Lendl phlegmatic, which I just wanted to say because it's a great word. But Roger's not stoic, but he was smooth, silky smooth. And really, when he needed to dig down, you got, come on, like then the emotion would come on, like, oh my God, like, yeah, Federer he's in this as much as anybody.
That's German, yeah.
But generally speaking, he would keep it suppressed and would only let it come out when he wanted to. And Mitch, it's honestly one of my favorite sports memories ever was that Aussie Open when he beat Nadal, because it was like I still struggle to comprehend it, because at that point everyone's like, Rafa's better. Rafa's 2017 when he won it in 5 sets.
Yeah.
And it was like, at that point, I was like, Roger's done. He's his mid-30s. He'd had the injuries now. I'm like, yeah, Rafa's beating him. And like that match, I remember getting up at 3:40 a.m. without an alarm clock. Like I was ready to go for this one. Yeah. And I remember watching it. I don't know about you. It's tough for me to rewatch the whole tennis match, but I've rewatched that 5th set. Once he won 5 straight games, ended up winning. I was like, what? Once Roger flipped the switch, it was just incredible to me. I remember that last point, you remember, because they weren't sure. Nadal challenged it. So there was kind of anticlimactic. He hit it, you had to wait. And then you saw the emotion. It's like, And then Fowler's like, he's done it. Fowler's done it. I'm like, it was like one of the happiest moments of my life, because I said, this guy's an all-time great champion. Everyone thought he was washed up, and he did it again against his greatest rival in a major. It was incredible.
That match in particular, and I'm on the West Coast, so I just didn't sleep. So that's a spoiler right there. Yeah. They were both coming into that. Nadal was damaged from the year before. Federer was like the 17th seed, and both guys came in. You thought that's the funniest part looking back, is you thought this was it for both of them. And then Federer wins 2 more after that, and it all keeps going. It was that one rally at the 4-3 game that wouldn't end. I know he won 5 straight to end, but it was a rally that ended with the back end up the line. That was, we got pessimistic over time. And then at that rally was when I think a lot of us said he can actually do this. Like it's there for the taking.
Yeah, and it was always so upsetting to me because Nadal's forehand would go right to Roger's backhand, his weakness. So I was like, God, this just isn't a good matchup for Roger every time. Right when he hit that, and something also so pure about that one-handed backhand of Rogers when he could hit it and just hit it on the nose like that. It was awesome to see.
Yeah, we were at the practice court at Indian Wells that year, and he was just ripping backhands. And there were people that followed his whole career that probably traveled from nation to nation to see him. They were saying like he's found something here. And then he beat Nadal like 4 times that year, won Wimbledon, and just kept it going. And, I just think for Federer, the statesman-like quality, there's never been a better representative of their sport in my lifetime. I don't know how far back we can go with that, but he just represented the game. And I think at his purest sense, and then he loves winning more than he hates losing. And that's kind of weird to say, especially in certain cultures, but he just loved being out there. And, I'm with you in the sense that he never showed a lot when he was dominating, but something weird happened when he did struggle that we clung on more as like diehard Federer fans. We were like, he's vulnerable. We don't know how long it's going to last. It lasted way longer than we thought, but just seeing him out there and struggle kind of humanized him in a way we didn't really think was possible early.
Oh, yeah. I remember watching him at the U.S. Open. I forget the year now, but it was against Djokovic in the final. And I think he lost in 4 sets. And I remember there was a couple Serbian guys nearby. And so I was like, God, these guys could be more obnoxious. But after as they turned, they're like, great match. Great. Like, we love Roger too. Like, Roger's our second favorite player. I'm like, yeah, of course. Everyone loves Roger Federer. How could you not love Roger Federer? But it was certainly frustrating. And again, you focus now on the loss because I thought no one ever touched 20. I'm like, well, he's the greatest ever. And that's over. Now I'm like, man, that Wimbledon 2019, I'm like, he had Djokovic like 2 match points. I'm like, that it still keeps me up at night. So I'm like, that would have been one more major. That would have been one more Wimbledon. Like that would help the head-to-head record with Djokovic. And it's funny because people will try to mock, as you said, I'm still hanging on for dear life to the GOAT label. I've now altered it a bit. L. John Wertheim agrees with me on this at least, because he's like, it's a tough argument to make. He's still the best ever. And I said, well, hang on a second. There's a few things in this. One, if you're just going by majors, then obviously he's not the best ever, but nobody just went by the majors. As you know, as a tennis aficionado, Rod Laver did not win the most majors ever, but he's in the top 5 conversation ever. And if you're just going to go by majors, then that's a different argument. Then we could just go by, most Stanley Cups. Army Richard's the best player ever. Like, it doesn't work that way. So yes, what's happened is this generation has been more focused on majors, and therefore Djokovic and Federer train themselves more in that area. So I get that. Tiger, obviously in golf, more on majors. If you ask Nicholas Palmer, those guys weren't as fixated on majors. You can go by overall wins. You can go by longevity. You can go by the era in which you played. I'll try to make the excuse that Federer was older when those guys were younger. But of course, when Federer was dominating, Sampras and Agassi were getting older. But I will close with this point. And it kind of goes to what we're saying. If you look at legacy and influence on the game, Roger Federer has inspired more people to pick up a tennis racket, I think, than anybody. Roger Federer made tennis a bigger event in our generation, our lifetime. He's done as much for the sport than anybody ever. So I think in that example, you go, okay, well, who the hell won the most majors? Who cares? This guy, I could ask anybody about Roger Federer. They all know who he is, and they all know he's a Class A individual. And I remember reading the great book by I get the name now, New York Times writer Wallace. Yeah. Cleary. Yeah. He was great. And I read Chris, and he's got one story in there, but Federer taking a tour of the Nike offices in Oregon. And after they're driving away, he's like, oh shoot, I got to go back. And they thought he forgot his phone or something. And he had to go back just to go thank some people that he forgot to thank. And he's like, this guy's unbelievable. And it clearly goes, I can't tell you how many guys I've interviewed, because it's the relationship with athletes is you simply ask questions, they answer, and they leave. He goes, Federer would actually take an interest in you. Like, so how you doing? What's up with your brother-in-law? Whatever happened with that book you're writing? He goes, it's so unusual what an anomaly is. And of course it goes to his parents, Robert, and they're such great people. And obviously American, he's got great kids. And it's just like, as a family man, the guy's the best.
I'm excited to see what the next step for him is. He looked pretty sharp coming out there at how, coming into that next stage. And I can kind of end with this. I mean, the Hall of Fame discussion, he's up for, I think, 2027. That'd be the same year as Serena. I don't know if the city of Newport can handle it. So I've heard rumblings that maybe because it was just the Labor Cup match, they can get him in a year earlier to stagger it. But we're going to have the dam open for Hall of Famers, because these guys and girls won all the majors. That it's been kind of dry for candidates recently, but some hitters going to be descending into Rhode Island in the tennis world soon.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Mitch, because it is never too early to get my tickets there to Rhode Island. Because as you know, working in Connecticut for 9 years, one of the first things I did is somebody told me the Tennis Hall of Fame. Of course, I got to go. So I only went to Newport a couple of times. The beach wasn't crazy for the kids. A lot of rocks. We were for some reason kind of cold, but of course I went to the Tennis Hall of Fame. And the biggest thing was I was so happy they had grass courts, but I was wearing flip-flops that day and it still bothers me. It's like, oh God, I want to play the grass court. So that still needs to happen. And it's honestly, one of the joys of my life, that people I've met Wayne Gretzky and Tiger Woods and Mike Trout and you name it. I have so many great athletes, but of course I've never met Federer. And between now you, Weissman, L. John Wertheim, Marty Fish, I feel like I have enough connections now that someone is going to get me a handshake and a picture. So Hall of Fame, whether it's 2026 or 2027, I will be there. I'll be camping out. We're looking for 10 seconds with Roger. I mean, fingers crossed. I'm not going to put the cart before the horse. Maybe somehow I can pull enough swings that this could happen.
I'll never say I have that kind of pull, but if I did, and I love this conversation, you're the best, but if I got you in front of my mom, I don't think I'd ever be allowed in the house again. So I'm going to have to play that card first.
What I'll do is I'll be there. I'll just superimpose a picture of me and Federer shaking hands together. But you are right. I've thought about that. People have said, oh, you're going to be there for the Hall of Fame. I said, oh, of course. But I was like, you and I both know Newport's a small place. So I'm going to have to get there very early. People will be camping out for Roger. People will be coming from Basel. It's going to be unbelievable.
More with Adnan Virk here on Tennis Channel Inside In. Well, in that post-Federer world, are you still keeping tabs on how the game's developing? We have this new generational struggle. Djokovic is still there setting records on the men's side, but Carlos Alcaraz got to #1, got a major title. Some of these Americans, some of these Canadians even are stepping up. Like, what's your take and assessment on the landscape of tennis in 2020?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the Canadians because I went to the US Open last year and was fortunate to see Shapovalov, and my 6-year-old son, Shaz, who I hope to get playing tennis soon, he still says to me, hey, remember when we saw Shapo? We're going to see Shapo again. I'm like, we're going to see Shapo, buddy. I probably will see FAA. We're going to see Shapo. We're going to support all of our great Canadians. I'm always a little fearful because I'll never forget seeing Jeannie Bouchard in the Wimbledon final and going, here we go. Like, Canadians are about to dominate. And then unfortunately, things have not gone Jeannie's way. Terrific commentator, by the way, Tennis Channel. Love seeing her when she's with you guys. But I see Bianca Andreescu, and I feel good. And I definitely feel good about both the Canadian men that I mentioned. And it's great for Canadian tennis, man. I'm sure you know. I mean, being from Toronto, the Rogers Cup when it's in Toronto or the one in Montreal, like, it would always draw well. People love tennis in Canada. It's always been very supportive of tennis. So I hope that the Canadian tennis guys and ladies can be strong. But it does feel a little odd now because Rafa, we don't know how much more he has left. I don't know. I mean, I think he's going to try to play the U.S. Open, but I really don't know. I mean, maybe this is it. Maybe one more French Open. And Djokovic isn't slowing down. But it was fun to watch that Djokovic-Alcaraz match. I was texting Steve. I go, this is unbelievable. You got the match of the year on Tennis Channel. Like, it was 8 a.m. I was locked in. And then I never understood, by the way, this is a separate conversation probably, but it's like 2 sets. Then it goes to NBC. Then it goes to the Peacock. I'm like, hey, I'm sticking with Tennis Channel. I started with Tennis Channel. I'm going to end with Tennis Channel. I'm not going to flip channels over now. I'm not going to be some fair weather fan. I'm supporting the guys who had it. But that match in particular, okay, strap in. As again, we can talk about all the sports, and I'm a huge sports fan, but when tennis is at its best, good luck topping that. You're not going to be Djokovic, Alcaraz, French Open, and then the cramps come in and you go, crap, there we go. Like, this thing's done. So I feel like it's inevitable that Alcaraz will start to get to Djokovic, but honestly, Mitch, I don't know when it's going to happen. Like, it might be another year. Like, I was like, this is the moment. Passing the torch. Alcaraz will get him. Then I'm like, Djokovic might still add 3, 4, 5 more majors to his total. It's crazy.
It's the natural order of sports. The young guys come up and push the old guys or girls out. But we're in uncharted territory because we have this guy that's not slowing down. And we do have the advantages of modern medicine. And the motivation is what gets me, right? Like, if you look at history of tennis, even players just kind of tap out when they get to early 30s. And it's happened with, Borg had that mental block. Sampras even set all the records, didn't have anything else to prove, walked out. But here's Djokovic still going. I think this generation coming up, though, it's going to be interesting when the dam opens up, when there isn't a Djokovic. And I think we have, I won't say it'll go full slam, 4 different slam winners, but I think we'll have to see some guys sharing. And, that's kind of what it was. I mean, McEnroe and Connors only won 7, 8 slams apiece. So I think we might get to those numbers for a few.
Well, that's a great point, though. And I want your opinion on that. Like, don't you feel like when people discuss the greatest players of all time, you can't just go by majors, right? You have to, I almost feel like you have to go by era and say, okay, that was the best of this era. That's the best of this era.
Agassi were the first generation to be like, we're prioritizing all majors. And even Andre didn't play everything, but Sampras was really the first one. It's like, I'm chasing the major record. This is what I want. I mean, if you go historically, the guy that you can't even compare is Borg, because what he did in such a short time, he deserves to be high, because I think his total would have been a lot higher if he kept going. But it is era specific, because even Rod Laver, it's hard to put into context what he did at the time he did.
Yeah, you're right. It's almost an impossible conversation to do. But speaking of Agassi, I did want to mention, I mean, one of the greatest books ever. His book Open, phenomenal. And I remember waiting at a bookstore in Toronto. I don't think I've ever done this before or after, because I realized my lesson, like, this probably isn't worth it. But I waited 2 hours just to shake his hand and get an autograph. And all I wanted to tell him was that match against Blake at the US Open was one of the greatest things I've ever seen. So I'm like, I just want to tell him that. I don't know why this is so important to me. I'm waiting 2 hours with a 27-year-old man. So I go up there, he signed how many books? And I go, Andre, I just want to tell you that match against Blake was one of the greatest things I've ever seen. He signs, he goes, it's in there, and just hands me the book. I don't know what I expected. I expected him to go, oh, thank you so much, man. Yeah, it was a dream for me as well. He's like, it's in there. I'm like, okay, well, thanks.
Never tell me that. Yeah. Yeah, he saw him and Steffi at the Vegas Golden Knights game. I was surprised that he's drinking out of the cup after. They're diehard fans. I do want to wrap with this. This has been a great chat, Adnan Virk, talking on Tennis Channel Inside In, the sports and movie connection, because I know you have the podcast where you go in and out of all the entertainment news. You do movies, TV, you're criticizing things, you're talking about what you love. And now that you're in the big George Foreman doc as an actor yourself, I have to throw that in there. But I want to know if there's going to be more of a tennis tie-in. We've seen the Challengers movie coming out. We've seen the new show on Amazon Prime. I'm a sports movie junkie myself. Tennis has never really nailed it. So I'm hoping that gets to be, and maybe you can shed some light on why that might have been a trouble to be not a great tennis movie out there.
Yeah, it's a great question. Like, when people tell me tennis movies, I'm like, I'm sadly thinking of Wimbledon with Paul Bettany and Kirsten Dunst. There's a great tennis scene in the movie Strangers on a Train, which I love, the great Hitchcock movie, where they're going back and forth, and it's really well cut the way Hitchcock did it. But you're right, we never really had that great tennis movie. And you especially would have thought in Europe, right? You would have thought there was some European movie, some British film about a champion, but we'll get an Eddie the Eagle movie before we get a Boris Becker biopic. So figure that out. But hopefully it'll happen at some point. I once told Wertheim, because I interviewed him on my podcast when his book came out, one of his other books he had written. And I said, listen, you got to do like a Holy Trinity series. I said, you got to do a Federer book, an Nadal book, a Djokovic. It's going to be like 400 pages each. Like, just go really in depth. And then you can make that into a documentary, put that for Tennis Channel. Like, you wrote Strokes of Genius, which is great, the book about the greatest match ever, Federer and Nadal. Although I argue always the Federer erotic match the next year to me was just as incredible. 2009. People don't know. And 07 was a great Federer Nadal match. Like, maybe I'm just partial because 08 Fed lost, but I'm telling you, 07, 09 Wimbledon were still great matches.
I mean, that book is great and Wertheim's amazing, but if Federer would have won, you'd probably have a different reaction to like, this is the greatest book match ever. But it was unfortunate how it went down. But yeah, the
light, by the way, it still pisses me off, Mitch. As you know, like, they couldn't see anything by the end. Like, I know you couldn't just suspend play, and I'm not using it as an excuse, but it was unfortunate. But it did feel epic, and the rain delays and all the rest. I mean, it was an insane match.
Yeah, it was a tough one, and we know that the camera made it even seem lighter than it was. But yes. No, I think tennis is in a good place, and I'm just hoping that there's been more crossover appeal. We've seen some personality. Not everyone can be as elegant as Federer, and I'm not just saying that because Nick Kyrgios was in the Wimbledon final last year, but we've got some personalities out, so that's a good thing. Adnan Virk, this was a blast. We'll have to do this again. Thanks for carving out some time into your busy schedule. What we got MLB Network going on all summer. So between baseball and tennis, there are no dog days of summer, in my opinion.
No, I completely agree. When everyone always says, oh, June and July, good time to take vacation. I'm like, are you nuts? I'm like, no, baseball's going right to the All-Star break, and we've got Wimbledon. Like, I don't take any time off. And then August, September, like, oh, well, Labor Day weekend, get away. I go, no, I'm watching tennis. What the hell's wrong with you? So I'm with you, man. My summer is one of my favorite times to watch sports. I'll take February off. That's the month I'm like, there's not much going on. And just to finish the point about tennis and the conditioning of the athletes, like, just look at that schedule, right? The tennis schedule goes year-round. They take 1 month off. That's it. Other than that, they're always playing tennis. It's such a grind. And I have such respect for people who cover the sport like yourself. So I really appreciate it. Dude, I've done so many interviews, so many podcasts. No one's ever asked me to come talk tennis. So I was really appreciative that you reached out to me. And I'm sorry I was a little bit late today, but hopefully we'll do it again.
Perfect. Adnan Virk, thanks for coming on the show. We'll get to the Steve Weissman stories next time you're on. Out there stuff.
Yeah, I've got more than a few in the holster, so we'll get to those next time.
I'll have that for, not blackmail, but just stuff I can use to advance myself. But no, Adnan Virk, thanks again for coming on Tennis Channel Inside In.
This was great, Mitch. Great questions. I really appreciate you leaning into all the Federer stuff. We'll definitely talk again soon.